Welcome to the debate. When you train a pilot to fly a commercial jet, you don't start by dropping them into the cockpit during a Category 5 hurricane. You put them in a simulator where the sky is blue, the wind is zero, and the runway is clear. The environment is entirely sterile, and well, because it is sterile, it is safe.
Right. Yeah, the variables are perfectly controlled. But the problem is that eventually a pilot has to fly a real plane in the real world, right? Where sudden crosswinds exist, where instruments malfunction, and, where air traffic control cuts out. If they only understand the physics of the simulator, a single gust of unexpected wind might bring the whole thing down.
Absolutely. And if you've ever used a language learning app, flipped through a travel phrase book, or sat in an introductory language class, you have experienced this exact simulator. Today, we are looking at the pedagogical and philosophical implications of scripted language acquisition.
Specifically, we're using a foundational text from Easy English Daily, a lesson simply titled At the Clothing Store.
Right. And on its surface, it is a straightforward dialogue between a customer, Emma, and a salesperson, Daniel. But beneath that surface lies a profound methodological question. Does providing language learners with a perfectly frictionless, highly scripted transactional dialogue serve as the optimal foundation for linguistic autonomy?
Or does it present an artificially sterile model of human interaction that actively fails to prepare learners for the chaotic realities of real-world communication? Because we are looking at the fundamental lie we tell learners about what a conversation actually is.
The fundamental lie.
Yes. I mean, when we examine Emma and Daniel's interaction, and specifically the concluding review segment that commands the learner on how to use this material, we are looking at a methodology that makes very specific, deeply problematic claims about how fluency is achieved in the human brain.
Well, I view it quite differently. My position is that this text's utilitarian, highly structured approach is a masterful distillation of functional language. By intentionally removing the friction of real-world unpredictability, this text grants immediate economic agency to learners.
Economic agency.
Exactly. It strips away the unnecessary noise so the learner can master the essential mechanics of a transaction. The goal of introductory material must be what I call transactional efficacy, the raw ability to buy a shirt without having a panic attack.
And my position is that this sanitized linguistic simulation prioritizes rote compliance over genuine communicative competence. By presenting an idealized world where every linguistic input guarantees a perfect, predictable output, we are ignoring the friction that is inherent in actual human exchanges. We are setting the learner up for a massive system failure the moment reality inevitably deviates from the script.
Let's start with that concept of transactional efficacy. When someone is learning a new language and steps off a plane in a foreign country, their immediate need is not to debate philosophy, and it's not to form deep relational bonds with a shop clerk.
Sure.
Their immediate need is to survive and function in society. They need to eat, they need to navigate transit, and in the case of our source text, they need clothing. Look at how efficiently the dialogue moves the learner through the necessary stages of commerce. Emma enters and immediately identifies a need. I'm looking for a shirt for work.
Right, she states the need.
She establishes the parameters of that need. I usually wear medium. She evaluates the product. Where are the fitting rooms? She requests variations. Do you have it in blue? And finally, she executes the purchase. This frictionless script isn't a flaw in the pedagogy. It is highly necessary scaffolding. It builds the learner's confidence and gives them functional autonomy in a deeply unfamiliar environment.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about confidence, but look at the cost of how that confidence is being manufactured. Have you considered the psychological impact of this deeply idealized, almost utopian capitalist scenario?
Utopian.
I mean, yes. The text essentially reduces language to the mechanics of a vending machine. You insert the correct phrase, you receive the desired shirt. Think about the reality constructed in this dialogue. Emma asks for a medium, and Daniel instantly produces one. Emma asks for the fitting rooms, and they are magically available immediately on the left.
Well, stores do have fitting rooms on the left.
Sure, but the exact blue alternative she desires is flawlessly in stock too. And the crowning achievement of this simulation, which I find absolutely baffling, Is a surprise $10 discount applied without Emma even having to prompt for it? Daniel just says, it's $35, but it's currently on sale for $25.
Okay, yeah, I will concede the unprompted discount is a bit absurd. No one just volunteers a discount in the real world without a coupon or a negotiation.
Exactly. But that absurdity is symptomatic of the entire framework. By teaching language as a perfect stimulus-response loop, this methodology leaves learners entirely unequipped to navigate the actual negotiations, misunderstandings, and edge cases of human interaction.
I think edge cases is the key word there, though.
Paint a picture of a tourist in a real-world edge case, though. They walk into a loud, crowded store. They use their perfectly memorized phrase, "I usually wear a medium," but the clerk responds, "We're out of mediums in that cut, but I have a large that runs small if you don't mind a polyblend."
Right.
What happens? The vending machine model breaks. The learner freezes. Every single request from Emma is met with perfect, immediate fulfillment from Daniel. Here's a medium. Yes, we have blue and black. Of course. It's an unbroken chain of affirmative compliance. If a learner internalizes this structure, they are going to approach a real salesperson expecting their carefully memorized phrase to function like a magic spell.
The magic spell analogy is interesting, but I think it misses what is physically happening in the brain of a novice language learner. Learning these foundational phrases is exactly like a pianist practicing scales.
Scales.
Yes. When a pianist sits down to practice a C major scale, they aren't under the illusion that every piece of music they will ever play consists solely of ascending and descending whole septs. They have to master the predictable, rigid structure of the scales before they can possibly hope to improvise jazz. The script isn't meant to represent every complex reality, you know? It provides the fundamental baseline.
But a pianist playing scales knows they are playing scales. A language learner reading this text is being told, this is how you shop.
Because they need that controlled environment for cognitive load management. Let's unpack the mechanics of that. When you are operating in a new language, your working memory, the mental scratch pad you use to process information in real time, is incredibly limited.
True.
Wrestling with pronunciation, vocabulary retrieval, and syntactic structure. If I have to say, "Where are the fitting rooms?" my brain is furiously trying to remember the word for where, the correct conjugation of the verb, the plural noun for rooms, all while monitoring my accent.
It's a lot of plates to spin.
Exactly. Throwing in an unexpected hurdle like the blue shirt being out of stock or the fitting rooms being closed for cleaning would completely overwhelm their working memory. The brain literally cannot process the unexpected variable because 100% of its processing power is dedicated to forming the initial question. The unbroken chain of affirmative compliance you criticize is precisely what allows the grammatical structures to take root in the brain without overloading the system.
I agree that cognitive load is a real constraint. But if the only sheet music you ever give a pianist is scales, they will be utterly paralyzed when asked to play a chord progression. You argue for cognitive load management, but we must look at the specific vocabulary this highly structured environment champions.
Which is incredibly useful vocabulary.
The text selects very specific phrases for the learner's toolkit. What size do you need? Where are the fitting rooms? Can I pay by card? This brings us to the utilitarian lexicon embedded in the text. You're celebrating this utilitarian reduction as empowerment, but I argue it reduces the learner to a mere consumer executing a script.
Oh, I absolutely celebrate it as empowerment. The review section of the text brilliantly highlights the most crucial tools for the learner. These phrases are not just vocabulary, they are instruments of power. They empower the learner as an active economic agent. Active?
Yes. Notice how Emma controls the interaction. She tries the shirt on, she evaluates it, and she actively rejects the initial offering. It fits well, but I think I'd like a different color. She secures the blue one, and she successfully navigates a transaction where she acquires a product. She is not a passive recipient. She's directing the flow of commerce through these targeted, highly utilitarian phrases.
She is directing commerce, yes, but at the total expense of human connection. Can I pay by card strips away all the social nuances of language. When we reduce language to pure commerce, we strip away the relational aspect of human communication.
I mean, the vocabulary chosen here frames the entire human experience as transactional. Daniel isn't a person, he is an obstacle-free conduit for Emma to acquire a shirt. There's no language provided for social grace, no language for expressing uncertainty, no language for polite negotiation.
I have to push back hard on this idea that stripping away social nuance is a failure. Social grace in a foreign language is a luxury.
A luxury.
A luxury that comes after transactional survival. You cannot express polite, nuanced uncertainty to a shop clerk if you do not first know how to ask where the fitting room is. We have to look at the neurology of language acquisition here, the affective filter, the psychological filter that dictates how much language a learner can absorb is deeply tied to anxiety.
Sure, anxiety is a massive barrier.
When a learner is terrified, their amygdala triggers a stress response. Cortisol spikes. When cortisol spikes, the literal language processing centers of the brain shut off. By keeping the interaction transactional and predictable, the text lowers the affective filter. It reduces the anxiety of the learner so they can actually begin to engage. The economic agency, Emma, demonstrates the prerequisite for social nuance.
Lowering anxiety is important, certainly, but false confidence is just as dangerous as anxiety. If you give someone a map that shows a perfectly straight road, they will feel very confident driving. Their affective filter will be wonderfully low.
Right.
But if the actual road has a cliff and 3 hairpin turns, that low anxiety will lead directly to a crash. By presenting this frictionless interaction, where Emma says, "Can I pay by card?" and Daniel just says, "Of course," we are handing the learner a map of a world that doesn't exist.
But if Emma doesn't have the baseline confidence to even open her mouth, she never gets in the car to begin with.
Which brings us precisely to how she is expected to learn to open her mouth. The text doesn't just provide a dialogue, it gives explicit instructions on what the learner is supposed to do with it.
The review section.
In the review segment, Daniel issues a very specific pedagogical directive. Listen, repeat these phrases and practice using them. This is the pedagogy of rote repetition. This methodology, the rote memorization of robotic phrases, fails entirely to teach linguistic adaptability. It assumes that language is an audio file to be played back.
Wait, are you suggesting repetition has no place in language learning?
I am suggesting that if language is taught simply as repeating what was heard, it fundamentally misunderstands what a conversation is. A conversation is a dynamic, unpredictable co-creation of meaning. It is improvisational by its very nature. If the learner has simply memorized where are the fitting rooms, they are not learning how to build sentences. They are memorizing sounds.
Well, memorizing sounds has its place.
But when a clerk's response deviates even slightly from the script, say, instead of "they're over there on the left," the clerk speaks in rapid colloquial English and says, "Just past the registers, grab a number from the attendant." The learner, who has only engaged in rote repetition, will experience total communicative collapse.
Your premise assumes that rote memorization is the enemy of adaptability. I argue the exact opposite. Rote repetition of functional phrases actually creates the cognitive bandwidth required for adaptability through a process linguist called chunking.
Chunking is a valid cognitive mechanism, but
Let me explain exactly how it works in this context because it's vital to defending this text. If I have to construct a sentence word by word, my brain is doing heavy computational lifting. But if I memorize "where are the fitting rooms" as a single chunked block of sound one vocabulary item rather than 5 separate words, my brain bypasses that assembly process.
right, it's a shortcut.
I just hit play on that track. Because the production of those phrases is automated through repetition, the learner has the mental energy left over to process those unexpected variables you are so concerned about. If they don't have to think about how to ask for the fitting room, they have the bandwidth to decode the clerk's complex directions about walking past the registers and grabbing a number. Highly structured repetition is not a barrier to adaptability. It is the essential neurological stepping stone to true fluency.
I understand the theory of chunking, and I agree that retrieving a single phonological loop is computationally cheaper for the brain. But what you're doing is handing them a script for a play where they only have their own lines.
How so?
Imagine being thrust onto a stage. You say your perfectly chunked line, "Can I pay by card?" And the other actor looks at you and says, "Systems down. Cash only, exact change." Your chunking didn't prepare you to understand the response.
But they successfully initiated the interaction. They got the ball rolling.
But the text explicitly commands learners to practice using them in their own shopping conversations. It promises that these specific phrases are the key to unlocking the real world. It does not say, memorize these to build a baseline. It treats the memorized phrase as the end goal. If the pedagogical goal is true fluency and preparing them for the real world, the text should be introducing variability. It should show Daniel asking a clarifying question that Emma doesn't understand. It should model the language of repair.
What do you mean by the language of repair?
The specific phrases we use when a conversation breaks down. How to say, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Or, I don't understand, did you say cash only? Or could you speak a little slower? The complete absence of conversational repair strategies in this text proves my point perfectly. It is prioritizing the illusion of a perfect transaction over the messy reality of actual communication. If you want to lower the affective filter, teach the learner what to say when they get confused. Don't pretend confusion doesn't exist.
I mean, the inclusion of conversational repair strategies would certainly be valuable, perhaps in a subsequent module, but we cannot ignore the sheer practical utility of what is provided right here, right now. Could I see it in blue? How much is it? These are universal anchors of commerce.
Anchors, yes.
Even if the salesperson responds unpredictably with systems down, cash only, the learner has successfully initiated their intent. They have thrown the anchor into the water. That alone provides immense psychological comfort. We must not let perfect be the enemy of the good. The sanitized script gets them through the door of the clothing store, which is the hardest step of all.
Getting through the door is important, but leaving the store with the shirt, feeling like you actually engaged in a human interaction, is the ultimate goal. If we teach language merely as a rigid tool for transaction, we are doing a disservice to the learner's potential for true connection.
So, looking at where we stand on this artifact, my perspective remains that the highly structured utilitarian framework provided by the Easy English Daily Text is an incredibly powerful, scientifically sound pedagogical tool. By offering a frictionless, perfectly scaffolded dialogue, it manages cognitive load effectively. It utilizes chunking to free up working memory. It provides crucial economic agency, equipping the learner with the high-frequency phrases necessary to survive and transact in a new language. This structured foundation, even with its utopian lack of obstacles, is exactly what ultimately allows for the development of broader linguistic competence.
And my stance remains that while the text provides functionally useful vocabulary in a very narrow sense, its sanitized nature risks leaving learners fundamentally unprepared for reality by reducing human interaction to a perfectly predictable vending machine model, and by relying on rote repetition without offering any strategies for navigating conversational breakdowns. The pedagogy prioritizes an idealized, frictionless transaction over genuine communicative adaptability. It teaches them how to speak in a simulator, not in the real world.
I think we do find a point of convergence, however, in acknowledging that the specific target concepts highlighted in the review section, what size do you need, where are the fitting rooms, how much is it, are undeniably essential realities of everyday commerce. A learner simply must know these concepts, regardless of the methodology used to embed them in the brain.
Oh, absolutely. But target concepts themselves are essential. The vocabulary of commerce is necessary for survival in a new environment. It is simply the philosophical wrapping paper of absolute predictability that I find detrimental to the learner's long-term success.
This text ultimately forces us to reflect on a much broader philosophical question regarding how we approach language acquisition. Is language primarily a rigid, utilitarian tool designed for executing necessary transactions? Or is it a dynamic, unpredictable medium for messy human connection?
And if you've ever tried to learn a language, you should consider how your own experiences map onto these two frameworks. Have you found comfort in the rigid predictability of a memorized script? Or have you felt betrayed by that script the moment you stepped out into the real world and a native speaker went completely off book?
It is a question that requires us to examine our own assumptions about what it means to truly communicate. There is clearly much more to explore in the material, and finding the balance between necessary structure and real-world spontaneity is a challenge every learner must navigate. But as we leave you today, consider the pilot we spoke of at the beginning. The simulator is incredibly safe, the weather is always perfect, and the runway is always clear. But eventually you have to open the door, step outside, and face the wind.